Welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. I'm Clyde Haberman, filling in for Sam Roberts. It's been nearly 2 weeks since the leak of a Supreme Court draft opinion suggesting that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. The issue took center stage in the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday when the Senate failed to pass a measure to protect abortion access nationwide. As my first guest, Adam Liptak, wrote in the New York Times, the leaked draft opinion also sent mixed signals about what other precedents might be at risk. It has also caused some states like New York to take action. Joining me now, the New York Times' Supreme Court correspondent Adam Liptak, who's also the author of the Sidebar column. Adam, welcome. In the past, we've had justices like Earl Warren appointed by Republican Dwight Eisenhower, who proved to be a grave disappointment to Eisenhower. We had Hugo Black, once a member of the Ku Klux Klan, became on the court as fervent a protector of the First Amendment as we've had. Byron White was certainly more conservative than President JFK figured he'd be. Sandra Day O'Connor did not always go along with what I think President Reagan, who appointed her, had thought. But are today's justices more rigorously ideological than their predecessors as a group? Are the chances for such surprises less common these days than once upon a time?
You make an excellent point, Clyde. These days, the party of the appointing president perfectly predicts, in many cases, how the justices are going to vote. So the 6 Republican appointees are all more conservative than the 3 Democratic appointees. That will remain the case when Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson succeeds Justice Stephen Breyer, who's retiring. So all of those examples you gave, and there could be many others, Blackmun, Souter, Stevens,
Right.
all of those are from a bygone era. And these days, where presidents used to fill a seat because it would help them politically, or it would be balance the court geographically, or it would, as Truman did, put cronies on the court. All of that has fallen by the wayside, and ideology is king.
How certain are we? You've touched on in a piece that appeared on in Thursday's paper about whether or not other hot button issues are up for grabs now. Same-sex marriage being a prime example. How certain are we that indeed these issues are on the line right now?
So there's several ways to think about it, and they cut in different directions. If the draft opinion turns out to be the final opinion, it's reasoning that rights that are not found explicitly, literally in the Constitution, and that are not part of the nation's history and traditions, are not legitimate constitutional rights. That logic, that reasoning, could suggest that bans on same-sex marriage, bans on gay sex, or even access to contraception could be at risk. At the same time, the court does not usually get very far out of step with public opinion, and all of those rights are less contested than abortion, which is a deeply divisive right. And the court also looks at what it calls reliance interests. Have people ordered their lives around these kinds of rights? And it would be a hell of a thing for the court to unmarry countless gay couples, for instance.
Wouldn't that same kind of logic apply to abortion rights? I mean, it's been half a century that it has been licit nationwide.
That abortion rights supporters certainly think so. And for the court to eliminate a constitutional right established 50 years ago and that has been part of the fabric of the nation is quite a move. The court overrules precedents more often than people think. At major celebrated cases like Brown v. Board of Education overruled a major precedent.
Right.
But the court tends to overrule in the direction of expanding rights. For the court to overrule Roe, it would be, at least in the eyes of supporters of abortion rights, a dramatic step toward reducing rights.
In your contacts at the court, do you get a sense of how the justices, and especially Chief Justice Roberts, how concerned they are about the court losing legitimacy in the eyes of the public? Polls seem to suggest that that is happening. they're not immune to public opinion, as you suggested earlier.
Chief Justice Roberts cares deeply. He views himself as the custodian of the authority, prestige, and legitimacy of the court. And it's for that reason that, based on questioning at the argument and on other reporting, he's not inclined to overrule Roe v. Wade. He would take a more modest step. But he seems to be alone among the 6 Republican appointees. The 5 others are emboldened, impatient, and ready to go to restructure American life, even at the cost of a blow to the court's reputation.
Can you, without turning this into a civics lesson necessarily, can you take us through the process of how, I think a lot of viewers don't quite understand how a court ruling comes to be drafted. This particular one, the one that leaked so famously, was written in February, so we're now 3 months beyond that. Is there every reason to believe that what exists now and what may exist by the end of June, when the court probably releases its decision, will be vastly different from what we've seen?
So the short answer is, chances are this is the template for the ultimate decision. The court heard arguments in this case on December 1. A few days later, they tentatively voted. Reporting from Politico, which broke this story, suggests that there were 5 votes, and that's consistent with the questioning argument. 5 votes to overturn Roe. The tentative majority opinion was assigned to Justice Samuel Alito. That draft circulated in February, and we don't know yet whether it has attracted 5 votes, whether Chief Justice Roberts, who wants to take a more modest step, but still in the direction of restricting abortion rights, can pick up any votes. We can be quite confident that the 3 Democratic appointees will dissent.
To shift ground just a little bit to Justice Clarence Thomas, does the political activism, he's been somewhat politically active himself, but does the political activism, particularly of his wife Ginny, damage him, perhaps irreparably, in his standing on the court? I mean, there she was at the January 6th rally last year. She wasn't part of the riot, but how much does the activism of a spouse, I can't recall, frankly, in my lifetime, and perhaps even well before that, where the spouse of a justice was a factor.
Right, and it's more than just attending the rally. She was also actively texting the White House.
That's true.
To urge steps to be taken to overturn the election results. So this depends on what you think about whether a spouse's activities should be imputed to the justice. I mean, there are many, many professional couples who operate in related arenas, and just exactly when that should require the justice to step aside is a point of some controversy. But for Justice Thomas to have sat on a case and been the sole dissent in that case, which allowed the disclosure to the House Select Committee looking at the January 6 events, to let them have access to some documents, in the eyes of many ethics experts, was a grave misstep. The court doesn't really have a system for second-guessing the recusal decisions of individual justices, and I don't know how much Clarence Thomas cares.
There is that. How important is collegiality among the justices in terms of what ultimately gets produced that affects all of our lives? We've written that relations have gotten frosty between the Chief Justice, Roberts, and Justice Alito. While it'd be nice if everybody got along, and very famously Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg did, even though they were on opposite poles of the political spectrum. Is this something that's basically inside baseball, or does it really matter for the Republic?
The justices don't change their votes based on how much they like each other. They're committed to various jurisprudential philosophies. Uh, they, on a superficial level, try to get along. Being on the Supreme Court is described as an arranged marriage with no possibility of divorce. So, so you really try. But are there authentic friendships on the court? I think they're few and far between. I think this is a building, you can imagine it is made up of 9 separate little law offices in which people try to pursue their own agendas, pick up votes, and they're not picking up votes based on charm. They're picking up votes based on reasoning. And so I don't think the atmosphere is nearly as bad as it was, say, in the 1940s when the court was described as 9 scorpions in a bottle. But it's also not great.
Yeah, but they're not just raw intellects. They're also human beings. Aren't they not affected by likability? Are we not all more easily persuaded by people we like rather than those we can't stand?
Yeah, of course. And there are some real, I mean, when you think of office politics,
Yeah.
part of it is personality, part of it is appealing to people's self-interest, part of it is making coalitions. So it's not, in my mind, mostly based on what you'd call friendship, but it is based on the kinds of tactics you use to get people to come along with your idea.
When you were on the show a few weeks ago, I did ask about the whole issue of imposing term limits on the justices. Might this whole Roe v. Wade issue and the leak, in particular, give impetus to a movement to impose limits rather than lifetime appointments?
I don't know how much it adds. I think that term limits are a good idea, widely accepted, almost uniformly adopted in the rest of the world, but probably would require a constitutional amendment. Would this push in that direction a tiny bit? Yes. How often is the Constitution amended? Very rarely. And even if we had them, they would take some years to kick in. So it would be no short-term solution to any problem raised by this decision.
Fair enough. Adam, thank you. You're very busy these days. I appreciate you coming on. Next on New York Times Close-Up, getting the city back to normal, one street sweeper at a time. Welcome back. As the city gets back to normal, whatever that is, the ritual of alternate side of the street parking is coming back too, between the restaurant sheds, bike lanes, empty office buildings, and the largest rat infestation in a decade. The business of cleaning the city has had to shift. And typical of New York, not everyone is happy. Surprise on that, huh? Joining me now is the person in charge of this endeavor, the newly appointed commissioner of the Department of Sanitation, Jessica Tisch. Welcome, Commissioner. Before the tape started rolling, you were saying that this is a job you've wanted for years. Why? Why would anybody?
Oh, it is a job I've wanted for years. And I think sanitation is the essential service.
Yeah.
So every day, New Yorkers leave out 24 million pounds of trash on the street that the department comes and collects. The sanitation workers are the epitome of the neighborhood hero. I've known that, and I have definitely seen it in action over the past 3 weeks since I've been the commissioner.
Uh-huh. What has COVID's effect been on sanitation, both in terms of the health of the workers and in terms of cleanliness of the streets? I don't think it's much of a secret to any New Yorker that the streets are dirtier than they used to be. Forgive me for going on, but a member of the council the other day said, complaining about street cleaning in his borough, which is Queens, said that you can eat off the streets of Manhattan. I live in Manhattan. I don't think I'm ready for curbside dining yet in that form. Anyway, where have we been during this crisis?
So I'll start with what it did to the department, and then I'll go on to what it did to the city. COVID ravaged the department for a while. I mean, we had 2 periods, both in March, April 2020, and then again this winter where our sick rate was over 25%.
Wow.
We've had 10 members of service die from COVID, unfortunately. And we've seen the rest of the department really step up big for New Yorkers. I mean, there were times, especially during this winter, when the Omicron wave took its toll on the department. We had the 25% outage sick rate. We had the sanitation workers and the supervisors who were at work were working 16, 17-hour shifts, 7 days a week. We really saw tremendous dedication from the sanitation workers to this city during COVID. We estimate that about 60% of the department actually had COVID and was out sick at one point or another over the past 2 years with it. As to the toll it took on the city more broadly as it relates to cleanliness, for sure, I believe, and I think many New Yorkers see that the city is noticeably less clean now than it was pre-pandemic. And we are working really hard under the Adams administration to change that, to make a meaningful dent on the cleanliness of the streets and restore the cleanliness and order that we enjoyed pre-pandemic that I think New Yorkers deserve. Things like working on containerizing our trash. Instead of the trash bags, the 24 million pounds of bags sitting out on the corner serving as a free all-you-can-eat buffet for rats. We recently announced a pilot to containerize that
Right.
trash so the rats can't get to it. We're working on creative things with our litter basket service. So we see a lot of New Yorkers complain about overflowing litter baskets. That's dollars and cents, right? When that budget for litter basket service was cut, we saw the complaints rise, and we're happy to be able to restore a meaningful amount of litter basket service to the 23,000 litter baskets citywide.
On the containerized part, I was going to ask this a bit later, but now that you've mentioned it, how will that work? And will this mean there'll be giant bins in front of every apartment building, which it itself doesn't have much appeal for most people, I would imagine.
So my first week on the job, the mayor joined me in announcing a $1.3 million investment in piloting containerization in New York City. So we launched our first container in Times Square. I feel like if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And what they are large bins that trash bags go inside of to get
Okay.
them off of the curb, get them away from the rats. We are working on a 5-borough pilot. So we want to test it in residential, commercial. We want to work with business improvement districts. There is a lot to learn. For sure. Things like weatherization. Does it actually work in practice? How do we collect? The containerization is super complicated. There are a lot of cities in Europe that have fully containerized their trash. I spoke on the phone the other day with the person who runs waste management in Barcelona, a city that has containerized trash. There is a lot to learn in this pilot. It is not a silver bullet. It is incredibly complicated, but this investment is really intended to give us those learnings and that real world experience and figure out how and in what context it's appropriate to roll it out.
Why can Barcelona do it and we can't?
It's not that we can't. We're going to look and explore if we can and how we can. I'm a can-do person, so if we can, we will. I want to be really clear about that. But Barcelona is much less dense than New York City. They do their collections every day. They tend to use more trucks for their tonnage than we do. So they
They
send
have smaller trucks than we do.
Yeah, but they have special trucks that are designed to lift and hoist containers. So instead of the sanitation workers throwing the bags in the back of the truck and the rear loaders, there's a mechanism on the truck to lift up the container. What they saw in Barcelona, though, is that people leave their trash around the container.
Ah.
So then they have to send another truck behind it to come as a rear loader to pick up the trash and throw them in the back of the truck. So these are the types of things that we want to learn.
In terms of commercial waste, there are many companies that do this, and they often work in the dead of night when New Yorkers, strange that people that they are, want to sleep. Is there a way to rationalize this system a little bit more and not have, dozens, I probably am exaggerating, but many companies using going to the same neighborhoods and reduce it to a few?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. We are really excited about a huge undertaking that we have going on right now, which is part of our commercial waste zone program, where the City Council passed legislation, and we've broken the city into 20 different zones. And in each zone, the Department of Sanitation is going to be licensing 3 carters to operate in that zone. Not 1 carter, we saw that go really bad in LA, but 3 carters, so there's still competition. And those carters will work and those trucks will work in that zone. So we're gonna see a huge decrease when this is fully rolled out, in the mileage that these trucks traverse every night. And we're really excited about the benefits of the commercial waste zone program when it's rolled out. We're in the RFP process now, so you can expect implementation to begin in about a year, over the next year.
Good. That was not a planted question, by the way, folks. It may have seemed like, but it wasn't at all. It's a fascinating development if it can rolled out. The Times 2 years ago did an article saying that our recycling is not brilliant, and all too many people throw all sorts of trash together, and so much so that China, for example, and perhaps other countries are not interested in our recycled waste as much as they had previously. Does that remain? Now, that was 2 years ago, pre-COVID. Does that remain an issue?
I think it's an issue. Our recycling rate is about, for metal, glass, plastic, is about 50%. But what's really clear is that we need to both reduce waste generally and reduce the amount of waste that we send to landfills. Today, after decades of recycling, we're only at about a 20% diversion rate.
Wow.
And people talk about zero waste by 2030. That was announced as a goal in 2015. In 2015, when that was announced, the diversion rate was 18%. So in the 7 years since, we've gone up 2%. And so one of the things that I'm going to be looking at is how we can really kickstart our diversion rate. The time to do it is now. We've made a lot of, I think, smart investments that we've recently announced in composting programs. For example, we announced composting is going to be rolled out at all New York City schools. And I think that's a good investment because it's training the next generation of New Yorkers, getting that muscle memory to separate out their organics. We're putting smart bins across the city. We announced 100 new smart bins for organics that are going to go in front of every New York City school so that parents can drop their organic waste there. We're piloting a bunch of different things, and we're looking for real action on the organics front.
Where does our garbage go? I mean, I know we float it out in other cities. Are there other cities perhaps increasingly reluctant to take our trash or charging more than we're happy to pay for?
No, actually, right now the cost for recycling is way down because the value of the commodity has gone way up. That I don't expect to be a forever thing. That's a very nice thing right now. But our trash, we have a series in our solid waste management plan. We have a series of marine transfer stations. We have 4 across the city. And so when it's collected, the trash goes to the trucks go to the marine transfer stations. They dump there. We also have a rail transfer station, but they dump there, and then yes, it gets sent off on barge to its final resting place.
Without, I mean, am I misguided in thinking that some cities, other cities are increasing?
No, I think that that's certainly an issue that we are going to deal with as part of our solid waste management plan. So every 20 years, the city is required to put together a long-term look at how we manage our waste. And so that is due in 2026. It's a huge effort, and it charts the course for the next 20 years. So that's a study that we've just starting right now and that we will be working very hard on over the next 4 years.
We have less than a minute, Commissioner. You mentioned muscle memory. Let me also talk about muscles. Does sanitation have its Me Too moment? I mean, is to some degree this going to be a male-dominated force by definition, just in terms of body strength to lift a lot of heavy bags?
You know, I've spent the past 3 weeks traveling to sanitation garages across the city.
Hope you've been lifting there.
I've spent the past 3 weeks traveling to these garages across the city. I've met a number of New York's strongest who are women. They are fabulous. We are hiring a new class this summer, and we are actively recruiting more women to join the force. It's something that's very important to me.
Okay, we'll see how that works. Thank you, Commissioner Tisch. We'll be back here next week for the New York Times and CUNY TV. I'm Clyde Haberman. Thank you for watching.